talk at medical school about natural family planning, and one of the actually department chairs, a woman, said, "This sounds like just putting it all on the woman. She has to do all these observations and everything." And I said, "Actually, I beg to differ. This is the only method that's actually a couples method. It only works if the couple both know about it and buy into it. And they both have to agree to use it together, otherwise it doesn't work. It's not, wearing a condom, it's not taking a pill, it's both understanding. We decide that we're avoiding pregnancy, these are the days we're going to not have sex." So it takes both of them. So anyway, I think that's an important, and that's something that, and if you listen to couples and talk about it, it's not always easy, sometimes it's very difficult, but they will usually tell you that they think it's worth it, and it's strengthened their marriage. And there are some studies about, let me go back for a sec. There's some studies about intercourse frequency in couples that use NFP versus couples that don't. And the overall number of times of intercourse per cycle is about the same. But it just, instead of being like twice a week, it's, more here, none here, more here, but the total number in the cycle is about the same.
You were gonna mention something about apps.
Yeah, let me come back to that and remind me if I don't. Let me just talk about a little of this for a second. So different NFP methods use different combinations of symptoms and signs to identify the beginning and end of the fertile window. I don't think you need to really know all the details about all the different methods, but you just should be aware there are some different methods out there. And we have several of them available here in Utah and in the diocese. But the one that's most available is the Creighton model, because that's the one that I think is most useful medically. But there are a couple of them. So let's just talk about cycle beads is a calendar method that can work for women with regular cycles. 2-day method you don't hear about too much, we won't talk about it too much. The Billings method is a cervical mucus method. And we do have a number of Billings teachers, especially in the Spanish-speaking community, that teach that method. It's very similar to the chart I showed you, but the chart I showed you was a Creighton chart. And I won't get into, unless you want to, a lot of details about how Creighton is different, except that it's similar to Billings, but it has more standard procedures and more medical applications.
Is Creighton a doctor or a hospital?
Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a Catholic university, and it's where Thomas Hilgers, who is OBGYN, developed and did the research. He started with the Billings method, and then he developed it into what they call the Creighton method, Creighton model. That makes sense? So yeah, it's named after the university. Symptothermal is using mucus and temperature together, basically, and some calendar calculation for the beginning as well, usually. And then Marquette model is the one that uses, it's a NFP method that uses one of these clear blue monitors. And that, that's also available online. It's through Marquette University, another Jesuit university. So that's another current method. And then there's a method called lactational amenorrhea. Just to be aware of this, that it is, there's a lot of myths about this, but if a woman's just had a baby and she's totally breastfeeding and she hasn't had her period, she's really very unlikely to get pregnant for 6 months. As soon as she starts giving supplements, like giving a little bottle once a day or anything like that, then the probability of pregnancy goes way up. So that's just what that means, lactation amenorrhea.
You hear a lot of women say that they thought they wouldn't and they did.
Right, right, and usually,
I started cycling in 8 weeks.
yeah,
I didn't have a break.
they have to not be having a period. If they either start supplementing or they've had a period, then that goes out the window.
What does supplementing mean?
giving formula,
Formula.
or solid,
Instead of always nursing.
giving anything besides breast milk.
Yeah. So when you're nursing, so you can.
What if you're
say you
pumping
gotta get product, but
instead of actually nursing?
We don't, we don't know the answer to that.
Could you say that again? I want to hear it.
What?
As if you're pumping instead of just breastfeeding off the breast?
Yeah, the pumping doesn't stimulate the breast in quite the same way as the baby sucking. And it's the how often the baby sucks that stimulates the release of prolactin, which is what both stimulates breast milk and suppresses ovulation. So the key is how often the baby's sucking frequently. And whether pumping is enough, we don't know.
I think my family was slipping supplements on me.
Was that?
I said, I think my family was slipping supplements on me because I breastfed for 6 months, but
Yeah,
like 8 weeks, I didn't get a reprieve.
right.
When you say supplements, are you talking about like vitamins and stuff?
No, I'm sorry. Any kind of calories that's not breast milk. Yeah, it's-
I'm getting it.
I'm-
I'm getting it.
Come on. Are you
I
a
know
pilot?
the term is good. So feeding the baby anything other than breast milk.
Okay.
So formula or cereal or anything, yeah. All right, so this is the World Health Organization definition of natural family planning and methods for planning and preventing pregnancies by observing the naturally occurring signs, symptoms of the fertile and infertile phases of the menstrual cycle. And avoiding intercourse during the fertile phase for avoiding pregnancy. But it's interesting that this definition includes either planning or preventing, both, you know. This is 1982. So a lot of people have gotten pregnant with the rhythm method, but it's not really a rhythm method. It's guesswork. Like I think I ovulate about day 14, so I should be okay. Days 10 to 16. My mother told me you're fertile in the second week. I'm due for my period, so I think fertile day. This kind of guesswork is what.
Baby
doesn't-
roulette.
Yeah.
Baby roulette.
Okay, so the standard days, I don't know how much I want to go into all these specifics. The standard days just has the woman count specific number of days, and it only works if she's fertile day 8 to 19, if her cycles are 26 to 32 days. That's the key. And it's a very simple method, but only about half of women fit that category of only having those kind of cycles. And it's used with these cycle beads where they can, put the ring each day, advance it.
And doctors today issue those out?
This method was developed for developing countries. And it's been actually a pretty good thing in some countries where they have nothing else available, or all that's being given to them is, here you gotta use the pill or the IUD, or if you want, you can use this. So they have an option. And it's about 94% effective for women with that cycle length. So it was developed for like Philippines, Africa, that kind of place. But having said that, there are people in the United States who like it and use it. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to skip 2-day method. Billings ovulation method. They learned to identify changes in their vaginal discharge, and then the peak day is the last day that the mucus is clear, slippery, or stretchy. That's the estimated day of ovulation. And those days and the 3 days after the peak day are fertile. And those are the stamps I showed you on that chart. It's more flexible. But it does, the Billings method requires that you meet with a teacher. That's not a weakness, it's just something you need to be aware of. And not something that I recommend women try to learn just from a book or online. And the crate model is similar to the Billings, but has medical protocols and a standardized teaching and recording. It does require personal instruction. They really do need to meet with a teacher several times, I think. Optimally at least 5 times to really get what they're doing. And then the symptothermal uses the mucus or the calendar to start the fertile phase, and the temperature and the mucus to end the fertile phase. So it's multiple symptoms to cross-check, and then, if there's no temperature rise, then you have to kind of change around what you're doing. And that's what, like when women are breastfeeding, that type of thing. And then Marquette is the one that uses the monitor, the urine monitor, with mucus or urinary monitor, ends it by, it actually has a calendar calculation. I should update this. And then it ends it with the mucus and urine. They don't use the temperature anymore. And then that costs money. They have to buy the test strips, which are about probably $10 a month. And the device itself, the bigger one is $200. This one I'm not sure, it's less, but I'm not sure what the cost is. And then we just talked about lactational amenorrhea. Pregnancy rate is less than 2%. If there's no period, there's no bleeding, and there are no extra calories. And by the time, in the United States, nobody totally breastfeeds past 6 months. They're all getting cereal or something by 6 months, so that goes, you know, but in developing countries, sometimes it can be extended.
Doctors should tell you that.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
So what do our pediatricians tell the public when they should start feeding cereal to babies?
6 months.
It's 6 months is the current standard, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's good, but it's just, so this is just but in settings where there's really no other option, let's put it this way, in natural fertility settings, like in tribes in Africa where they're still living like they lived, 200 years ago, and they don't have modern anything, which is very rare now, there's very few of that. But in those kind of settings, they have pumps, the average birth spacing, with no birth control, the average spacing of children is 2 to 3 years. And it's because of this, because they breastfeed for a long time.
So there's two babies, one's born and breastfeeds for 12 months, and the other one gets cereal at 6 months. Are those two children affected physically in size or development in any different way?
I don't think so, no. I don't think it's harmful at all. It's good for the baby to keep breastfeeding, but it's not harmful to introduce. I mean,
Now you
that's,
say in the US we stop at 6 months. What's it like in Europe and other places, Asia?
I don't know the data there, I don't know. Now, you can have a period of time where you're feeding cereal and breastfeeding, and that's what the pediatricians would recommend is going up to breastfeeding for up to a year if you can. But having other foods, gradually more and more other foods. So it's not breastfeeding and then stop. It's just kind of this gradual transition, less and less breastfeeding and more other food over those 6 months. So when women are not exclusively breastfeeding, they can use family planning. This is where they need a teacher to help them know what's going on. And this is an example of what a chart for a breastfeeding woman can look like. So no cervical mucus, and then a day, and then none, and then a couple days, and then none, and then. It's kind of like the ovaries trying to rev up and ovulate. And the estrogen rises a little bit and it goes back down, and it rises a little bit and goes back down, over and over again for a long period of time. And eventually, there's actually what actually look like mucus peak days, and finally there's an ovulation and a period. So if she wants to avoid pregnancy, she has to avoid all of these days because she doesn't know which one of them will actually turn into the actual ovulation. But there's also the days in between where it's a baseline infertile pattern and not.
So you're always like pre-ovulatory while you're breastfeeding, so those instructions would apply and.
Right. So this is where meeting with the teacher really makes a difference to know what you're doing for breast.
And it's prospective, so you know that
Yeah.
day if it's a fertile day or not.
It looks exhausting.
What looks exhausting about it? I'm just curious.
Like your mind would never rest. It's always on your mind.
Hmm.
Is it just till they pick up their schedule, or is this a forever thing if they're trying not to be pregnant?
Trina,
So you're saying like you don't know when you're actually going to ovulate, and that's on your mind? Is that what you're saying?
To always be counting my chart, or to always be marking my
Oh,
chart.
Okay. It's a habit that women need to develop, to just, every time they use the bathroom, just be checking, and at the end of the day, write it down and put a stamp on. It is a habit that people have to develop, to do it every day.
So you observe, like, every time you use the restroom and just kind of register, this is what I saw. And then at the end of the day, you chart your most fertile sign of the day and how often you saw it, so.
So once they pick up what they're doing, it's more natural.
It gets pretty routine, yeah. All right. Well, these are two of the methods that, so people might say, well, what if I just use a barrier during the, what if they just use a condom during the time of the mucus days? And the point of this slide, this is for two of the NFP methods, standard days, so that's a 2-day method, but if they use it with absence during fertile time, these methods are not quite as precise. This with pregnancy rates 4.8%, but with barriers it went up about a percentage point. So, and this one, barriers went up 3%. So it's not, the point is, they still are more likely than not to get pregnant, but barrier use is going to increase the pregnancy rates a little bit. And that's just the fact. I mean, that makes sense. What's going to be more likely to get pregnant during a fertile day? No sex at all, or sex with a condom? Right? The condom's going to fail sometimes. So, point of this slide is that the great model building, Symptotherm Marquette. Actually, Marquette is now taught online, so I should change that, but these are, do require a personal instructor.
These visits, are they half-hour visits, hour visits?
No.
No?
Does the insurance cover these methods?
They have been covering it now for reimbursement, usually, I think, because of the Affordable Care Act. If that goes away, then who knows, I don't know. But we haven't gotten them to cover it up front. We have to have, it, they have to send in their receipt to get reimbursed.
Still reimbursement?
Yeah. So the question is always, how effective are they to avoid it? This is a, I don't know if this, we have to know. I'll just go ahead. This on the left we have some of the usual contraceptive methods, and like IUD, sterilization, condom, shot, and pills. And on the right we have is NFP methods. And then perfect use is if it's used as directed perfectly, and typical use is accounting for human variability, human error. What people actually experience is usually more of the typical use. And these are pregnancy rates in the first year, so percentages. No method, about 85% of couples, give or take, will get pregnant in a year. But if it's less than 1% for these various contraceptive methods, except for the condom, it's more like 5 to 25. And this, of course, varies depending on how consistently they use it. And same thing with the pill, 3 to 15%. And so then with the NP methods, you can see a spectrum too. 5 to 22% for Billings method in different populations, 5 to 16 for Creighton, 2 to 20 for symptothermal. So couples can be on the low end of this and even get down towards perfect use if they're really conscientious and doing it carefully.
So if I read this slide correctly, so if you're doing natural family planning and using the Creighton model and you have sex 100 times during the most fertile period, you're gonna get pregnant.
Yeah, oh yeah. One time during the most fertile time, you're likely to.
That would explain a lot of things.
Oh, I see. But that's why you're not having sex in the most fertile time.
These are pregnancy rates when they're using them to avoid, so they're avoiding they're abstaining during the fertile time.
So typical use might be a whoops, or they missed an observation, or not being diligent about
Yeah,
observation.
things like this
or-
where they, I'm not sure what happened today, I didn't make sure if I checked, and we'll just assume that I didn't have mucus, you know. that kind of
Minor,
stuff.
minor.
Or let's just play Russian roulette, you know?
Or a lot of times couples say, well, let's just see what happens. That happens, it's okay. If they want to do, they have that, you know, there's nothing immoral about doing that, no problem. The point I'd also like to make is these pregnancy, typical use pregnancy rates are in the same range as condoms or pills. And it is possible for couples that have extremely serious reasons to avoid pregnancy to get down to the less than 1% pregnancy rates by using methods that are post-ovulatory only. You only have intercourse after ovulation. So who will use it effectively? What's important is that they get good training, they're motivated, and the couples communicate about it. It doesn't matter whether the cycles are regular, unless for the methods that we're talking about, great model. It doesn't matter whether they're highly educated or not. There's a World Health Organization study of the Billings method a long time ago now, in the 80s, late 70s. And the illiterate women in El Salvador actually did better than, used it more effectively than the women in New Zealand and Ireland. Slightly, not a huge difference, but you don't have to be highly educated to use it, you just have to be well trained in what you're doing. So these things are not the relevant issues for being effective to use, these are the ones that are relevant. That makes sense? So, well-trained teachers, that's Carrie and several others we have in Utah and the diocese. Motivation, you can't supply that to the couple, but you can talk to them about it, help them clarify it for themselves. And I had the very first, I'll tell you just real quick, when I first was in medical training, I was still in residency, and this was in Missouri. And the very first patient that came into me for natural family planning was trying to avoid pregnancy because she had a motor vehicle accident and had a brain injury. She had lost some of her memory and was having a lot of trouble just functioning. And so this was a serious reason to not get pregnant. And so because she had memory problems, she was having troubles remembering what she observed that day. And to top it all off, her husband was not Catholic, she was, and he was not really into this. He didn't want to do this. So this was like, what do you do with this? What we did is, the teacher met with her frequently, I met with her frequently, she kept a notebook, so every time she'd go to the bathroom, she'd write down that, and then at the end of the day, she'd look at all her things that she wrote down that day, because otherwise she didn't remember. And I thought, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Are they going to get divorced, or is she, what's going to happen here? But she really wanted to do it, so we supported her the best we could. And it was pretty amazing that her memory, of course, got a little bit better with time because she was recovering from her brain injury and improved over time. Her husband came around. It took about 3 months, but eventually he saw how important this was to her and said, okay, I'll work with you on this. And it really ended up being a really positive thing for him, but it took a while. It was kind of, initially wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. Anyway, you can run into difficult situations, and the key thing in those difficult situations is helping them clarify what they really want and being supportive. You're supporting them through it. So is it realistic What do you think, and when I talk to doctors, I ask this question, so what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say yeah.
Yeah,
If not, they can borrow my kids for a couple days. Well, you know, I think that there's creativity that can take place there. That's my
Yeah.
answer.
I agree, and I think there's a lot of, you know, people think you either have to be having sex or sleeping in different rooms. And, you know, I'm not advocating for, you know, things like oral sex and stuff like that. I'm saying there's a lot of ways that people can learn to be intimate without having to have sex every time and build their relationship. And they talk about that with spice, and that's the concept of different dimensions of relationship, and great model teachers are trained to, you know, they aren't counselors, but they can go over some basics with a couple, have them do a little inventory about different ways they relate to each other. And then, of course, if they need more counseling, that should also be something they could think about too, but, or if they need to meet with a priest or something in some cases, but in most cases, the couples can kind of figure it out themselves with some support. You know, it isn't just about every time we feel close, we have to have sex.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Doctor, I think I read something, I can't quote the numbers, but it was staggering to me, that it, talking about, well, what is intimacy? And to a man, it was, let's say, 80%.
Right.
There was intercourse.
Right,
And it was something like 20% for a woman.
right.
That's not one thing I'm targeting, you know, and until we bridge that
Right.
gap through communication.
I'm not saying intercourse isn't important,
No,
it's
but-
extremely important,
Yeah.
but that 80-20, and it's not true for every couple,
Yeah.
but it is sort of a cultural thing. That can shift a little bit, one can come down a little bit, the other one can come up a little bit, and they can do that while working together, understanding their fertility.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and, so anyway, I think the answer to this is yes, but this is what underlies a lot of people's objections to natural family planning. If they don't think the answer is yes, then it's not, doesn't make sense.
Right.
So why do couples use it? Well, we actually did some studies on this in Utah, and we asked couples what they thought would be positive, but these were couples just weren't necessarily using natural family planning. We explained it to them. They thought it would be natural, there'd be no side effects, it would help them to understand their body. But they also worried about whether it would be ineffective or they'd have to use too much abstinence. So these are the things that people think about. These are some patients, actually, some of my patients, I just asked them to write, why did you use this? We started using it because I like the idea of not putting foreign chemical or pharmaceutical things in my body. I like being in control of knowing what my cycles are doing. So this is the reason people, I think, you know, one of the reasons Catholics are a little more likely, I know, like Carrie showed you, a lot of Catholics still don't use it, but Catholics are a little more likely to use it is because they know more about it, they just are exposed to it a little bit more than others. But also the church support, of course, the church doctrine. But I think reasons people continue using it is that they see a positive payback on marriage and sexual satisfaction. There was actually a study on this in Europe, where the population-based study, it wasn't a natural family planning study, and they just asked women what they were, I think I have to go back and look and see if they asked the men too. But they asked the women what they were using for, you know, IUD pill, and there's some countries in Europe where there is more natural family planning use. This is in Germany, it's like 4 or 5%, in Poland it's like 40%. Anyway, there's some places in Europe where there's more use, and the couples that were using NP had a higher sexual satisfaction reported. For what that's worth. But it does, people do find a positive impact over time. So here's some more patient quotes. One of the biggest pluses is communication, sexuality, childbearing, parenting. These are all such big issues. NP, we're forced to communicate. We can't get around having to talk about it. Husband has taken some time to accept this new method because of its influence on our love life. The really great thing is that for all the self-control and discipline involved, we have both gained a strong sense of freedom and control over our powers of procreation. Our time together goes to the top of the to-do list on those days. Nothing makes you more grateful for something than when you can't have it. This dynamic has undoubtedly strengthened our marriage. So these are just,
I like that.
yeah. Started using it because I said that already. Some of these are good, okay. What do you think doctors think about this?
I think they don't know enough about it, so they
Yeah.
just think it doesn't work.
That's right. It's not what they know that's the problem, it's what they think they know that they don't, right? Yeah. And I've been working for, well over 20 years now trying to get the word out. And with some modest success among some of my colleagues who know this is actually viable. But it's still the vast majority of doctors that all they were taught in med school is it was rhythm and it doesn't work. So that's, don't be surprised if that's what you run into, yes.
So to a couple that is having problems getting pregnant, do doctors offer this option, or do they go right to?
Now, that's another problem. They don't
I
usually,
know,
they might tell them to go get some urine test kits for ovulation, which are of some utility, but they don't actually give you the most fertile days. Because remember, the most fertile days are a couple days before ovulation. So
my OB-GYN said, just have sex every other day.
yeah. As if that's something everybody can do. I mean, couples, it's really interesting. Couples with infertility will tell you sex gets to be really a chore, really a problem. It becomes a real negative for them because they're always worried about, and it really is. A chore. Yeah, a chore. So anyway, and with NFP that can turn around too, because they don't have to do it every other day supposedly. They can just pick 1 or 2 days that are the best days in the cycle, and they can relax, and eventually they can decide they want to do it for a relationship as well. But when they're always trying to make a baby, anyway, we did this. This is an old study, but basically, just doctors are not informed. I'll just tell you that. But NFP is really valuable for women's health. It's what we call cooperative and restorative reproductive medicine. So this is patient empowerment, supporting and restoring the natural body function. The couples know what's going on, women knows what's going on with their body. It's just better medicine. I can help them more. They know they're more participating in what's going on. And this is not just infertility, but it's other things like abnormal bleeding or premenstrual syndrome or any kinds of cycle-related problems. So there's I mentioned earlier, Dr. Hilgers, who developed the Crane model. He develops a set of protocols called, go by the term NAPRO technology, that stands for Natural Procreative Technology. And published a medical textbook on it. And it's really, and offers courses at Creighton University in Omaha every year to train health professionals and physicians, pharmacists. Carrie's been through it, I've been through it. It's really a very valuable contribution to medicine and women's health. But the number of doctors that have gone through this course nationally is maybe 400 or 500, which is a drop in the bucket with the number of doctors in the United States. So, and number of pharmacists is probably, 50 or something out there. So it's out there, but it's not, it's not recognized by, it's not big enough to be mainstream, unfortunately.
I have a question, doctor, and maybe more Carrie can answer that. I guess I would suspect natural family planning to increase, and not, you know what I mean? With the emphasis on women's power, and even like right now, with sexual harassment going on, and women having a voice and standing up and demanding this voice, right?
Right or wrong.
I would suspect, I mean, the numbers don't show it, but I would think a young woman today was going to say, I want to control my body, absolutely. So I
Well,
want to
right now
force this,
that- yeah.
or is easier contraception method just easier and I can live my life?
Right now, that's where it's directed, is contraception, abortion. That's the notation for reproductive health care.
Okay.
It's not, unfortunately, knowing and understanding your body. It's just like,
I have the right.
we
to-
demand
Yeah.
abortion, we demand our contraception to be paid for, and so on. So that's the reproductive health care messaging. It's not so much,
That's the marketing package.
yeah, that's the
There you
marketing
go,
package.
you have control of your body.
So when
by
you hear reproductive
contraception and
health care,
abortion.
that's the
Okay.
package. But yeah, unfortunately, and I think a lot of women
You know, there's so many more
are
people.
starting to say, hey, I don't want to put all these chemicals in my body, and
That's what I'm getting at, I mean, even
Yeah.
in the, you know, the grocery industry, more people are doing organic, more people are doing
Yeah,
this. More
exactly.
people
Yeah.
are eating beef without this, you know, this anabolic. And so
Yeah.
for a woman, I would just think, it
Yeah.
would be natural for a woman to say, no, I don't want the pill. I don't want this.
Yeah.
What can I do? And,
It's
but the
enlightening and
marketing
empowering,
the marketing
definitely.
is,
Sounds like you're ready for parish work.
you know, my answer, go see a doctor. And I've got some people you can go see.
No, it sounds like you got more passion right now.
so if you can change the framework just a
You know?
little bit to the middle, you know, versus like being on this side of reproductive health
You know, I
care.
guess if we were so worried about what's going on in our body versus how we're reading it and everything on the label,
Yeah.
then we would turn.
Yeah.
So I'm
Because
surprised,
the
I'm surprised
medic,
it hasn't taken over or taken over more.
Well, it's part of the
Yeah.
communication.
so what
is
we're
that
putting in
right?
our body is
Catholicism.
probably overrides by what, 400% the normal hormones, like in terms of potency. Like, so the synthetics that we're putting in our
I mean,
bodies
like
just,
pill synthetics.
yeah.
Which
just
is
to
reason
blood-
alone, from my perspective, to give more emphasis to NFP, because I'll
That's
tell
what
you,
I'm saying.
before this class, I kind of had a real chip on my shoulder about NFP, the term, because I was thinking of terms of abstinence as birth control, and I'm concerned about intent. If your intent is to avoid kids, well, what does it matter what method you use? So that was all I thought it was,
Yeah.
you know?
No, it's
Now-
empowering, as you can
Now,
see, like.
now I have a different perspective. But it takes a class.
It does, and I don't know if our dioceses have been equal in terms of really, you know, because when Humanae Vitae came out, there was a lot of dissent, right? Obviously, there's been a lot of dissent.
Well, they
over
make
the
it all
years,
about,
so-
they make it all about abstinence. It's all about, I mean, that's
Yeah.
from the average
Yeah.
person in the pew, it's about
Yeah,
abstinence. Oh, who would do that? Just use this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I'm ready for my parish too.
Yeah.
so those are all, they're great comments, because I think there's a real potential out there to connect to people, but they don't know about it, or what they do know is like, it's just, you know,
Bob said this.
you know,
The negative of
the
it.
negative side, right? And you have to abstain a lot, or it doesn't even work, or, you know, a lot of, and don't understand.
Or
that-
exhausting.
Right.
Well, that's why you were gonna say something about apps.
Yeah, okay, so let's get to apps.
Yeah. It is work, like,
Apps are definitely a mixed bag. So there are, I just saw some statistics this weekend, there are this incredible, like, a number of, like, 200,000 health apps out there, and of those, about 7% are women's health apps, so there's like tens of thousands of, there's thousands, let's put it that way, thousands of apps out there for the women to track their cycles. Most of them, and then they have all kinds, some of them just track their cycle, period tracker. Some of them try to tell you, they say, this is when we think you're ovulating, this is when we think you're fertile or not. There have been a couple studies now on them, most of them they're junk when it comes to determining time of ovulation and fertility. They're not even doing the calendar calculation they're doing is not even when the best.
and I think that's
Yeah.
why NFP suffers
Right.
largely, is just the the numerous apps, the lack of education,
Right.
no standardization in terms of, you know.
Anybody can put an app out there and make it look pretty, it doesn't mean that it has science behind it, you know? So it's really a problem, and it's a big problem, and I think, on the other hand, it does mean that some women are, a lot more women know when their period is, which that's an improvement from 10, 20 years ago, when women didn't even know that. So there's some opportunity there, and the opportunity is to try to get better apps known. There are some good apps out there, they're the small minority, and they,
When's the Dr. Stanford app?
I have, yeah, it's when I can raise about 40,000 to make one, and that's about what it costs, yeah,
That's what Kickstarter's for.
yeah. You know, that's a good point, we should maybe think about that. We actually, I have actually thought about that on and off, but, and I have some ideas that, you know, and I've actually gone to some of the app companies that do a little better job and said, you know, if you did this and this would be better, but so far they haven't listened to me, so I might have to do my own sometime.
Well, there's this company out called Axure, A-X-U-R-E, and it's a wireframing app. And basically what a wireframing app does is it lets you put buttons and labels and text boxes. And this is, they've had wireframing around for a while, but Axure is interactive. And so you can actually put this button there, and then you press the button, it shows what it's supposed to go to. And, you know, it's $500 for this software just for wireframing. But that money is saved so much on the front end, because when you finally get all your logic flows through and you show the programmer exactly what you want, you're saving like 70–80% of the development cost, where you think it's gonna cost you $40,000. If you spend the $500 and spend 6 months or a year getting all your logic flows done, and you turn it over to developers, you can get it done for like $5,000, maybe $10,000, or have Kickstarter pay for it.
The issue is like, also like once you release it, the important part of crate models, the instruction.
Yeah, I think there are some women that may have regular enough cycles that they could just go to an app, but I think there's really high value in the meeting with a person and that, getting that. And so, you know, but a lot of couples these days don't want to go to physically meet with a person, but our teachers are doing Skype and that type of teaching, and that I think meets that need really pretty well. So they'll do online teaching with them.
I learn better that way, for me.
Online?
Yeah.
No,
Oh, in
no,
person.
with
In
person,
person, yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's like we learned here from the class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
the kind of
dialogue
interaction-
and you can exchange.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
you can have some of that online, but I think you get, it's hard to beat doing it in person.
Well, everybody's, you know, I'm an auditory learner, so it's easier for me to remember
Yeah,
hearing than, I can read the 25 slides, but I won't remember them.
right.
Yeah.
All I know is when me and my wife just looked at what the topic was this morning, both of our eyes went to the back of our head.
I had that same,
You know,
I
so-
went and attended the intro session when I got married. I had that same attitude, so.
So it's really been enlightening. You know, the negativity
Right.
has,
Yeah.
you know, especially when it comes to a woman's making choices about not putting chemicals in her body and stuff.
Well, the thing I really liked about this class is that, you know, studies say what, like 70% of Catholics, call themselves Catholics, are using birth control methods. And so that's our audience.
Right.
And so how do we sell natural family planning to much of the faithful that are ignoring the doctrine of the church? And
Well, I think they told us.
it's easier when you learn this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think you sell it on the positives, you don't tell them you're sinners and you probably
Yeah,
don't.
exactly.
I don't think that works.
There's some options out there, there's some people that can help you,
Yeah.
that's what you choose to do.
Yeah.
So as we get
I mean,
out
we
there-
do the engaged encounter sessions, but I mean, surprisingly, we get very little.
I think they
buy
need to
in.
hear it from more, it's like anything, they need to hear it more than once from more
Yeah.
than one place before they really.
I mean, so much is ingrained, and
Yeah.
once you're, they've been on the
It's
pill
too
for
late.
years already,
Don't you
it's,
think the engaged encounters, when they throw that in there, it's just, you're so in the mode of just getting married, that's just a,
that,
Yeah,
it's
check
probably a
box.
check box,
Yeah,
Check
yeah.
box.
It's
Yeah.
a distraction.
I mean, for me, it was like
It's at the
aha,
wrong-
it was my aha moment, I was like, but I was a healthcare provider, and I was like, wow,
and you were older,
and I was, right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
for, someone,
21-year-old.
Right.
We went through when we were 18. We,
yeah,
like, it was
it's
just,
just like check box.
yeah, like it's not the right timing, like,
I,
yeah.
if we were smart.
I know if you can get women passionate about their bodies and,
Ninth grade.
I'm thinking, I think I
Like,
completely
when
agree.
it's-
in
getting
tune and teach
closer.
it from that aspect, I think it would.
Like, in all honesty, when we went and talked to our priest, we're like, now we're 27, okay, now we're ready to have kids. What do we need to do to prepare to make sure our kid's baptized, blah, 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 blah. He should have said, you need to, do the natural family planning.
Well,
know.
that's unfortunately when the diocese introduces, like, when you're getting married.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
So,
But it just has to be there when they come back and think about it later, yeah. 'Cause
So
they
who do
don't
we-
do it right away.
Refer people to, if they come to us in the parish, is it Viola? Refer them to you? to learn more
Viola
about it?
usually knows how to contact me. We have a website also,
We have a
it's
web-
Intermountain Fertility Care.
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit organization called Intermountain Fertility Care, not to be confused with Intermountain Healthcare, it has nothing to do with Intermountain Healthcare.
Yeah.
So intermountainfertilitycare.com.
And the care part is necessary because if, there's obviously Intermountain Fertility.
Right,
uh,
so yeah, so
clinic or-
it's kind of a long name, but if you can remember Intermountain Fertility Care,
Yeah.
that's a website that has our teachers.
Do you know
and-
James Carr?
Well, it obviously
Pregnancy
doesn't need
Resource
to
Center.
be a Catholic thing either.
Right.
I mean,
Runs it.
Right, and that's why it is a
Pardon?
nonprofit.
He runs it, I just wondered
Oh,
if you
yeah.
knew him.
No.
It's to reach
His
everybody.
ultrasound's there.
I don't
We have
I don't
our
know.
Picture of
teachers,
your husband.
teach
Yeah.
at,
Yeah.
I might know him.
we have
Even though the work is-
8 currently active, and I think
They're playing the high
I think-
road.
4 are Catholic, 3 are LDS, and 1 is Protestant, I believe. Anyway, so we have a mix of,
Our experience, of course, the minute you put a religious affiliation to it, our kids turn to run the other side, so it doesn't need to be a Catholic, right?
right, I agree.
Yeah, we have agnostics, atheists, you name it. Well, just don't want to put
New
chemicals in
Agers.
their bodies.
Yeah,
and-
that's right.
Yeah, and want a natural approach, so it's,
Where our kids are into so organic everything right now, that,
Yeah.
to me,
That's what I'm saying. I'm
That's
surprised the
probably
numbers
more
aren't
the
up, and maybe the
pull.
numbers will be up down the road because we are so in tune. I think of my own daughter,
Yeah.
where she's so worried about what's in this cheese that she's feeding her
Correct.
kids. But yet at the same time, it's much easier to take contraceptive than.
Right.
I mean,
It's just
I don't know how the word, I don't know how the word gets out, because I don't think you're gonna hear it from priests. I just don't.
Well, I think you're gonna hear it from us anyway.
Yeah. well,
That's you guys, right?
But,
Yeah.
but, you know what I mean? Because priests are gonna wash their hands of it, yeah, they understand.
'Cause I
it,
think
but they're
my-
not gonna get involved.
Yeah, because I think it's like, why would you want to put that
Oh, I
in
know
your
who it
body?
is.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's,
I don't know.
he's got a lot of energy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could just say that this is also really effective for infertility. So, we did, this is a study of IVF, or assisted reproductive technology out of the Netherlands, and compared it to a study that I helped with out of Ireland, where they were using the natural technology approach. And so the average age of the couples in this study was 35.8, and this study was 33, so they were actually older, almost 3 years older. And a third of these couples had previously failed IVF, and these were all trying it for the first time. Live birth rate in 2 years was 53% in this group. And this one, they did not report their live birth rates, and that's important because at least 10% have miscarriages. So, but they said 65% were pregnant. So roughly, if you take a miscarriage rate out, these are roughly real equivalent. This was slightly longer time frame, but overall, and then this was a much harder group of couples. So,
That's impressive.
yeah.
Interesting.
So that's the kind of, I'm working on more of these kinds of studies right now, but in different places, including here. That's kind of a ballpark of what we expect. Not everybody has a birth, but a substantial number of them do. And so when we say NAPRO technology, it means doing the charting, natural family planning, but also medical evaluation and treatment. So it may be, and we're doing medical evaluation and treatment to restore their natural ovulation and cycles. And we're also evaluating and treating the men, because half the time there's a male component. But we're doing everything to support natural ovulation, natural sperm production for natural intercourse, to result in pregnancy.
Without the expense.
It's a lot less expensive. It's still there's money for doctor
Yeah.
visits and
Yeah, but
drugs, but yeah, a lot less. I think that'd be a good place to call it, right? Oh, I should say that the babies are healthier too. So our rate of low birth weight and prematurity is less than 4%, less than 5%. And with IVF, it's over 30% that have problems because of premature early babies. And a lot of that is because of twins, but not only twins, even without because they tend to have the twins and sometimes triplets and crazy numbers. But even without that, there's an increase in adverse outcomes with the IVF.
Can you comment, so it looks like there's doubling of perinatal mortality and birth defects, and is that because, our body does a good job at kind of funneling out maybe abnormal sperm?
Yeah, so abnormal sperm, the mucus also acts as a filter for sperm to filter only the normal sperm get through.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it IVF, you don't have that, you just get the
Hey, look at
sperm.
this slide.
Yeah. And you put, so, yeah. Yeah, the doubling for birth defects is from about 3% to about 6%. And the perinatal mortality is, less than 1%, but it does double. So, yeah, so it's a healthier, the babies that come out are healthier.
That's a big selling point that's been low played.
Yeah.
That's true.
I never thought about it for infertility. I thought it was always to avoid.
abstinence, yeah.
Yeah, it's family planning. Get pregnant, to get pregnant or to avoid pregnancy.
I was telling somebody earlier, in mainstream, it's random intercourse over the course of a year is the definition of infertility. Or if you're using the crate model, it's 6 months, and you can probably, if you go see a doctor sooner, they're able to identify it pretty quickly,
Right,
potential issues with fertility, but 6 months of targeted.
right. 6 months where you know you had intercourse during the good days. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the good mucus days.
Wow. Well, very good class.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
doctor.
Sure.
Thanks for taking the negative out of it.
Yeah.